Welcome to the Financial Coaches Podcast, where we talk about how to build your practice from startup to scale up while being the kind of coach your clients crave. Finally, a podcast for financial coaches. Here are your hosts, Maria Casillas and Cody Sizemore.
Hello and welcome back to the Financial Coaches Podcast. My name is Cody Sizemore. I'm joined here by my lovely co-host, Maria Casillas. And today we are going to be talking about something pretty cool. It's going to be talking about your X factor and what makes you unique and what makes you stand out from the competition. But before we get into that, just want to do a few things. Number one, I always love to shout out our every weekers, the people who check into this show and listen in every single week. You guys are awesome. You know, you guys are not the only reason that we do this show, but you're a big reason as to why we do this show, and also a big reason as to why we even have the ability to continue to do this show. We don't run any sort of ads. We don't get paid for anything like that. We don't get paid from this show in general, to be honest with you. We just do it, you know? So like the biggest reason as to why we do it is because we see that people are continuing to listen in every single week, that list is growing week to week. And, you know, we just love giving back and providing value. So we appreciate you more than you know. And if it wasn't for you, we don't know where this show would be. So another thing I want to make sure that we talk about too is also just a really good place for all of us, all of our every weekers to actually connect with us. And even if you're someone who's listening for the first time and you're like, hey, these people are pretty cool cats, how am I going to get in touch with them? You can do all of that very easily through our free Facebook group. And that Facebook group is called The Financial Coaches Community by New Money Habits. All you have to do is just answer 2 to 3 very simple questions, and we'll say, this person's good to go. And then you'll join in and you'll be able to see all the different updates pertaining to the show, pertaining to weekly events that we have, monthly events that we have, and you can ask questions, connect with different coaches, and of course, you know, maybe even pitch an idea of a talking point that we can do on this very podcast. So make sure you join as a part of that. And if you know any other coaches that would get value from this as well, we really appreciate the share and also the rating and review of this show as well. That really does help out with the algorithm, and it lets, you know, Spotify, Apple, all those different platforms know that you like this show, that it's a good show, and it pushes it out to more and more listeners. With all that being said, let's get into this. Maria, how you feeling today?
All right. It's good. It's a good day.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So you brought up this topic.
Yeah.
About the X factor, and I really, really like it because it's something that like we hear, or at least I hear quite a bit. Like, what's your X factor? You got to find your X factor. But I almost feel like it's kind of like, yeah, like I got to get my X factor, but what the heck does that mean?
You know? Well, first of all, I think that when we say it like that, I got to get my X factor, it conjures up this idea of like having to go out and find something, you know, and do that thing. Whereas I think a lot of times this is actually something that is a little bit more natural for each of us. And it's something that we don't have to try super hard at. Now we might have to try a little bit to discover it, to be able to verbalize it, to be able to then take it and let other people know about it. But I don't think that if you have this quote unquote X factor, that it's something that you're having to really go out and necessarily create. I do think we probably get into this a little bit, that once you determine a little bit about what it is, you can probably, I guess, improve upon it. You know, you can really make that something that becomes very obvious for other people. But I really think that that's one of the important things I want to bring up, is that it's something that kind of is innate for each of us, which is what makes it about you. Like, it makes it you, uniquely you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. But I know that people are probably wondering, how do I even determine what my X factor is? Maybe there's someone who's out there listening and they're like, I don't even know if I have anything that is unique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where would we start with that?
Well, I think one of the first things to do is to recognize what comes easily to you. And the reason I say that is because I had to learn the hard way. And honestly, Cody, I am still learning the hard way on a regular basis that the things that seem to be easy to me, I think or assume erroneously that they are natural or easy for everyone else around me. And the more I put that to the test, the more I realize that that's not always the case. And I think because we tend to hang around people who are similar to us, we're in groups that are kind of around things that we have common interest, that kind of thing, then we tend to be in a world where it's like most of the people around us seem like us. So it would make sense that, well, if this thing comes naturally to me, it comes naturally to the whole world. But that's not true. And oftentimes it might be something that's in common with people in that group, but that group is a very, very, very small fraction of the whole world. And so I would say start there. Start with something that you kind of feel comes naturally to you. And I know you're going to share a couple of ways that we can actually go out and just kind of determine the X factor based on norms, which I'm actually very much looking forward to. But before you do that, I would just like to also say, if you've been doing coaching for a while, even if it's not paid coaching, one of the second places I would tell you, so once you've kind of done your own thing and figured out what kind of comes naturally to you, I would go to people who you've helped and ask them, like, what did you enjoy about working with me? Like what, because they might say, well, I got really good at such and such, or I got this out of it. And if you just dig a little bit, you'll get them to tell you what they really, really appreciated about you. One of the most fun ones that I had somebody tell me, and I'm not sure if this is a compliment or not. I don't know. The jury's still kind of out on that. But when I asked her some of these questions that went digging, she said, you know what? I think the thing that I appreciated the most about you is that you aren't afraid to be a bitch. And I didn't respond. And then she goes, in the nicest way. And I mean, after unpacking a little bit with her, what I know she meant was I was fine telling her the truth. Like I wasn't uncomfortable being able to point out something that we knew together would be an uncomfortable thing. And that I was also very nice about it. So she didn't really think that I was a bitch. She just knew that I was willing to say the hard things, the things that might hurt, but in such a kind way that it could only help her. And that's one of the things that I've held on to. That was probably 7-8 years ago now. And I just, anytime I'm being that in a session, I remember like, that's actually one of the really cool things that you can do that not everybody can. Now, am I the only person in the world that can do that? Of course not. And I want you to hear that because the X factor does not mean that you're the only person in the whole wide world that does that particular thing, but it's a very small percentage of people who can.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that so with what you said about talking to past clients and asking them.
Yeah.
Great idea. Great idea. Even if it's, if you're just starting and you've kind of helped people pro bono, that would actually be a really, really good way for you to have like a better idea to really like lean in and, go to take that to the next level as you start, scaling your business from there. But yeah, figuring this out, I think is really important because once you understand what your X factor is, you can then have it course through the veins of your practice in every single way. It's about your messaging in your marketing or on your social media. How you talk is part of your X factor. And then also, how you conduct your consultations is part of your X factor. And even how you conduct your meetings in your coaching programs is part of your X factor as well. And I think that, there's some people who know it already and they're like, well, this is definitely something that I'm unique with. But then there's some people who may not know, so I think that one of those things that you can do is you can kind of do some market research and just say, hey, like, what does a financial coach typically bring to the table for people? and you'll see, a list of, services that we might provide or benefits that might be good from a financial coach. And you're like, yeah, like I got all that. And then just start brainstorming about, is there anything about me or my personality or my style that isn't in some of these things that I've found? And maybe that's a part of your X factor. And if there still isn't anything, if you're like, I'm kind of a plain Jane normie kind of thing, at least up until this point, then you could really brainstorm and you could say, what am I missing here? Because maybe there's something that I could bring to the table that adds a nice little flavor. That's a really nice complement to the already existing benefits of the service, right? And having that extra little flavor is really, really important. Even think about it like this. If you were to be on the beach and someone were to say, hey, you want a beer? You'd be like, hell yeah, I want a beer. I'm on the beach. And they'd be like, all right, cool. So then they hand you a beer. And Maria, what's the beer that comes to mind when you think about beaches?
Probably Corona.
Corona, yes. Now, if you are a person who drinks beer, chances are you like a good cerveza, which is the Corona, right? And let's say someone handed you that Corona and you just started drinking it. And you're like, all right, cool, yeah, it's a Corona, but something's missing. Something's missing here. Do you know what's missing?
Well, I don't know where you're going with it, but right now, the beach.
Not the beach.
But I'm assuming you have me on the beach right now, but now I'm ready to be there.
Yeah,
the lime is missing.
The lime, exactly. The lime. It's the extra flavor that doesn't come with the finished product, right? That's what we're kind of talking about. Like, your X factor is the lime to the Corona kind of thing. Or you put the lime in the coconut and then you shake it all up, So that's what we're kind of talking about.
All I know is next time we record, we better be on a beach. because now you just teased me, and I don't think that was very nice. I want to draw a connection between what I said and what you just said. I love your analogy, by the way. But the connection I want to draw is that while you're creating your own little spin on things, chances are it is something that comes a little bit naturally to you, but doesn't feel like it fits into the financial world. So, for example, one of the favorite things that my clients loved is when I started taking more of a creative approach and used color in the way that I coach people with money. And I wanted to do that for years, but I resisted because it didn't seem like the thing that financial coaches do. And even though it was something that came very naturally to me, it was like, yeah, but that doesn't fit into this square. And so finally, after a couple of years of resisting it, I decided, so what if it doesn't fit into that square? It fits into who I am, and I am in this square. So let's go ahead and just see what happens. And it ended up being one of the things that the clients loved the most. So I just want to encourage you that if you have something that comes naturally and you don't notice it yet, it's okay to use that as your lime, as your sprinkle into what it is that you're trying to make a little bit different.
Yeah. And so I want to share a little bit about my X factor, if that's okay.
I hope so. Yeah. I hope it's nicer than what I said about mine.
No, you're good. I think that you also have an X factor that I also share with you. So I think that part of our X factor is we actually share one, but I don't think that everyone has this, and that's really the mental and emotional sides of things, and just having that like intuitiveness to really dig deeper into things with people. That's a huge X factor, because there are a lot of people in the financial coaching world, or even in like the financial advising world or the financial planning world or whatever it might be, that really only focus on the numbers. They only focus on the money. They only focus on the budgeting. They only focus on the graphs and the results and the returns and all that kind of stuff. So that alone, if you are doing any sort of like mental or emotional or spiritual work that coincides with the finances, that alone is a X factor, right?
Agreed.
But like you with your coloring, I also have my own little spin on things. I come from the music industry. That's a huge part of my coaching. Music. Huge part. Before I, let people into my Zoom meeting, I'll have music playing on Zoom as like a mood setter kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably like a, lighthearted, like dancey vibe, good vibes kind of music to just set the tone that like we're gonna have a good time right now, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then even so, sometimes when I'm having like a meeting with someone and I can just tell that they're kind of in the dumps because something's going on, or their energy's low because they're tired or whatever it might be, I'll literally stop the meeting and I'll just be like, okay, we're going to take a second. We're going to stop what we're doing and we need to stand up. And they're like, what? I'm like, yep, stand up. I'm going to play some music and we're just going to have a dance party.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll throw on, something like Earth, Wind, and Fire, or like whatever it might be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Smash Mouth. I'm a big Smash Mouth guy. It's just something that like gets people into a good mood. Black Eyed Peas, whatever it might be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll bring them back and I'll be like, okay, cool. Are you feeling better now? And they're like, yes, I needed that. And I'm like, okay, great. Now let's get back to business, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So implementing music, even like if someone were to like have a win, or like, they'll have like an accomplishment in some way, I'll recognize that. I'll praise them for that. We'll cheer each other on. We'll do all that kind of stuff. But then again, I'll tell them, all right, get up out of your seat and we're going to play some music and we're going to celebrate this. And I always put on celebrate
Mm-hmm.
good times. Come on. That song, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Celebrate good times. Come on. So I always do that. And it's really fun with couples because they'll like start dancing with each other. They'll like pick each other up. If they have a dog, I've seen people pick up the dogs and like do all this kind of stuff, So just like working in music is a really big part of my coaching because it's where I come from. And I think that it's a really good pattern break as well, So that's part of what my X factor as well. And even some of the language that I use in my coaching, I'll say things like, let's amplify this, or I'll say like, hey, like you're going to rock your finances, or, like whatever it might be. It's those small things that kind of work into those, that X factor of making you a little bit more unique than anyone else that they might work with. So that's kind of where I come from as well.
Yeah. And I know you didn't mean this to be like something that I focus on, but I'm going to, because I think it's so important. Pattern break. Like, I know you were saying that you use music to be a pattern break, but that's a really good way of actually identifying a way that things are different. Like, that could be your X factor. What is it that breaks the pattern that people are expecting from a financial coach who, does X, Y, and Z? You are a pattern break. And I hope it's okay that I'm hijacking that from you, because I think that's a really great way of saying it.
Totally cool. Yeah, because it's really important. Like, if you're noticing someone not really present, if you're noticing someone kind of in a lower spot, it's not going to serve them to just keep going, you got to pull them out of that state so you can get them into a state that they're actually like open and they're ready to, receive, and they're ready to be energized and all that kind of stuff. And then you keep going, so pattern breaks are really, really important, and you have to do it at the right time. You obviously can't just do it because you're like, this, at 4:32, I'm going to insert a pattern break. No, like you have to do it at the right time when it's called for,
Yeah. Yeah. But I just meant, honestly, what I meant, Cody, was that your X factor is a pattern break. Like, if you can recognize what are you doing that's different than everybody else, it's like you are breaking the pattern of what people can expect from financial coaches in general. And that is an X factor of its own. So yeah, I agree. I mean, having your own language, having your own approach, having your own little quirky things, all of that sets it aside. And so do some of the results that you have. So you might have, like Cody mentioned, more of the emotional, spiritual, psychological results than immediate money return results. And on one hand, that might feel like, well, I'm seeing all these people over here, give all of this, immediate reward. But maybe 5 years down the road, those people aren't actually still in the same place as they were before because it was not a sustainable reward. And so maybe sustainability and change is what you have to offer somebody. So just do think about it. If you need to work through what that is, you could always ask to sit down with one of the coaches, in whether it's myself or Cody or one of the coaches in the group, and just have somebody walk you through that by asking questions. And you'd be shocked at how quickly you can kind of come up with what your X factor is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. Anything to add, Maria?
I don't think so. I think we've covered all of the things. Unless somebody comes up with a question for us that has to do with this, I think we've kind of given you some ideas. Love to hear what yours is. We shared ours, and I promise I won't be too much of a you-know-what here on the show. And now everyone who works with me, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, I totally see that too.
No, you're just
in the
real
nicest way.
Yeah. No, you're just real with people. And that's what I think is important. You being real, sister. So
yeah, well, we need more of that anyway. So, happy to be that for people when they need it. And no, I think we've covered it all today. So thank you guys again for tuning in. We will look forward to seeing you next week for another episode of the Financial Coaches Podcast. And until then, have a great rest of your week. Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Financial Coaches Podcast, brought to you by New Money Habits and Sizemore Financial Coaching. Submit your questions to our hosts by emailing podcast@newmoneyhabits.com. Be sure to subscribe to be notified of future episodes and join our growing group of like-minded coaches on Facebook. And until next time, happy coaching. Music provided by Summer School.